In this video, I'm looking at the Shanling ME80 high fidelity earphones. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. And before we get started, I just want to tell you about a couple of the specs here. The impedance is just 16 ohms and the sensitivity is 111 dB. So high sensitivity, low impedance. That basically means these are super easy to drive, so they work really well from any source, including straight out of a phone. And I'll quickly give you a look inside because you get a nice little kit. By the way, the price of the ME80 is $99. So you get a nice selection of ear tips, two different kinds, vocal and balanced. Now, I must admit, I am a bit of a Shanling fanboy because I've been very impressed with their products that I've tried in the past. Here are some of my favorites. I've got the Shanling UP4. It's still my favorite Bluetooth receiver amplifier. The M5S DAP, the M0 DAP. And by the way, you also get this case with the ME80. And here is the Shanling ME500 Platinum Edition, which are a fantastic pair of earphones, very underrated, underappreciated, but I digress. So let's get on to the star of the show, and that is the ME80 here. And I got to tell you, I really love these shells they've got here. These are just fantastic. Compared to the ME500, they've reduced the size by about 25%, and it might not look like that much of a difference, but it makes a big difference in your ear. You can really feel it. And not only in size, but the ME500 is significantly more heavy as well. This is a very lightweight earphone, so you'll hardly notice it's even in your ear. But let's come in closer for a look. Okay, so here's the shell of the ME80. You got this 2D glass on the faceplate there with the Shanling logo. MMCX connectors, which are color-coded. I love that. You've got a vent near the base of the nozzle, and that is about it in terms of physical features. So it's a fairly simplistic housing on the outside, but it looks very classy, very elegant, and they feel great in the ear. This is a super comfortable earphone. But enough with all that. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty and talk about how it sounds. So the ME80 has got a fairly lively dynamic sound. It's got good extension on both ends. So it's got an enhanced bass and a lifted treble, and it's got a lively, fairly forward mid-range as well. And breaking it down, starting with the bass. I love the bass on these. It's quite punchy. It carries a lot of weight. Got a good sub bass rumble. It's quite similar in a lot of ways to the WGT1 here. And overall, it's just a very good quality bass. It's quite textured. I love the sub bass. It has a nice deep reach to it. It can get a rumble going in your ears. And the mid bass, the transition from the sub bass to the mid bass is fairly linear. So the mid bass carries a lot of weight as well. It's got a real good slam to it, impact, fairly slightly rounded, but still pretty good leading edge on kick drums. And overall, it's a very satisfying bass. On to the mid-range now, and the mids are very clear. The clarity is very good throughout. Resolution is about average, I'd say, for a $100 earphone. It's nothing spectacular, but it's not bad either. I would say the mids are perhaps slightly on the brighter side of neutral. So you get very articulate vocals, not the most chesty or full-bodied vocals, but very clean, very clear, sort of uncolored mid-range. And the upper mid-range is quite boosted as well, so you get a lot of definition throughout the sound. Very clean percussion attacks, crisp vocals, and a very clean, slightly bright tone. And finally, for the treble is fairly lively on these as well. It's not excessive, but it is quite forward in the mix. There are a couple of significant treble peaks, one at 5 kilohertz, another one at 8, and then another one again at about 11. And that's where we get such good clarity from, the clarity throughout. It's quite an airy sound. The treble is nice and light and airy. It opens up the sound stage quite a bit. This treble does produce a lot of detail. There's abundant detail, so you'll hear lots of little things, little minute sounds that you might not hear otherwise. So that's definitely an advantage of a kind of enhanced treble like this. So overall, it has a very pleasing sound, but there are, however, a couple of issues that I personally have with it. The first one being the upper mid-range peak at about 2.5 or 2.5 kilohertz. It is quite up there. Let's throw up the frequency response here. So you can see the first peak there at 2.5 kilohertz, and that can cause a little bit of mid-range shoutiness. It is quite forward. It's up there, gets in your face a little bit. So electric guitars, certain sounds, things like flutes and upper registers of pianos sort of jump out quite a bit, and they can be a little bit harsh. Now it's hard to say whether it's the 8 or the 11-ish kilohertz peaks that kind of introduce stridency, but there is a little bit of stridency in the ME80's treble. It's not an inherently sibilant earphone, but if you have a sibilant recording, these definitely will not gloss over that in any way, and it can be a little bit punishing in some instances. I was listening to PG Lost's Key album, and I found on these it's quite an unpleasant experience because they've got a lot of reasonably high-pitched electric guitars and a lot of crash cymbals as well. And I found both of those quite fatiguing in a short amount of time, and I found myself having to sort of listen at quite a low volume just so I could bear with it, because that upper mid-range glare, that lower treble, there is some harshness there. And that is really the only thing I don't like about the ME80 sound. It's not a deal breaker. If you are a treble head, or if you like a bit of sizzle, a bit of extra energy in your sound, then you would probably love these. Now let's do a couple of quick comparisons, starting with, of course, the Moondrop Starfield, because I knew people would be asking about this one, considering they are both roughly the same price. And the Starfield, as you've probably heard, has a Harman frequency response or target response. And in general, it has a warmer sound, similar levels or similar quantity of bass in each earphone, but the Starfield has more fullness in the mid-range, and probably most significantly, it has less lift in the upper mid-range and the treble. So it is a slightly darker sound. It doesn't have the same level of clarity that the ME80 has, but it is a kind of a very laid-back sound that you could listen to all day long, whereas the ME80, I find, like I said, I find it fatiguing after a short amount of time, depending on which music you're listening to. They actually sound fantastic with quite a lot of music, but anything with a lot of crash cymbals, hot electric guitars, that can get a bit edgy pretty fast. So overall, yeah, Starfield is warmer, similar level of bass, but smoother in the treble, and my personal pick would be the Starfield out of the two. And now moving to the WGT1, which is a little bit of an underdog. It's a bit underrated, or didn't get quite the amount of exposure it deserved. And this one is actually a lot closer to the ME80 in terms of its frequency response, its sound signature. However, like the Starfield, it is a little bit smoother than the ME80. It isn't quite as boosted in the upper mid-range and lower treble. The lift that this one gets is a little bit higher up in the frequency range. So this one also does have its moments of stridency, but overall I find it smoother than the ME80. So once again, I would probably choose the T1 over the ME80, and it pains me a little bit to say that because, as I mentioned, I am a little bit of a Shanling fanboy, and of all the shells here, these are definitely my favorite. I think they look the best. They definitely are the most comfortable for my ears. And anyway, look, it's just more of a personal preference thing. I'm not saying these are bad or inferior to these products, just for my own personal preference and the kind of sound that I like. The ME80 is just a little bit hot, a little bit too bright for my tastes, but overall it is a good earphone. I think you get a really good bundle. The build quality is fantastic, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of Shanling's in-ear monitors in the marketplace because they are just making great strides. You know, I think this is only their third or fourth IEM model. The ME500 Platinum here is still one of my favorites at its price point. I love this to bits. This one not so much, but I'm sure some people would enjoy it very much. Anyway guys, that's about it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, Parfam audiophile style. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more reviews like this in the future, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, I'll see you later.